Good morning and welcome. As once again we ask that you join us in reflecting on the Gospel of St. Matthew for today's liturgy. Jesus summoned his 12 disciples and gave them authority over unclean spirits to drive them out and to cure every disease and every illness. The names of the 12 apostles are these. First, Simon, called Peter, his brother Andrew, James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother John, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew, the tax collector, James, son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanite, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed Jesus. Jesus sent out these 12 after instructing them thus: do not go into pagan territories or enter a Samaritan town. Go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And as you go, make proclamation: the kingdom of heaven is at hand. The gospel of the Lord. I find when I'm reflecting on Scripture that I tend to telescope time. I think what happened in the gospel narrative today is, for example, Jesus establishing the apostles and sending them out two by two. That happened yesterday. And then I read that he said, don't go to the pagans. So that means only the Jews. And then that means, well, that means Catholics, only Roman Catholics, because that's the church. And I go down this whole list of things that I'm conditioned by, which are maybe true, but really don't reflect what the meaning of the gospel is, the bigger picture. Jesus sent the 12 out and said, don't go spread yourselves too thin. But within a matter of years, he had St. Paul going to the Gentiles. He's having Peter challenged by Paul. Paul saying that law or Judaism, as depending upon rules and regulations, is erroneous. Doesn't say the rules are wrong. But he said that the gospel Jesus is preaching is really to envelop not just one group or one church, but rather the whole of creation. And all of a sudden, I listen with different ears, I hope, that what we think of as church has been changed. It took until Vatican Council in 1965 before the redefinition of church meant people of God. We certainly have an institution in Rome, and that's a good thing, but we don't like change. How many people are saying, I wish they'd leave the church alone. They're taking away my church. And the answer is that the church is not to make God happy and to give me some security. But if I listen to the gospel, I too am being sent out through baptism to preach to everyone, not one group, not one church, not one country, but rather the whole of creation, that God is alive and he's not restricted, and that he's present in our world today. There's no blueprint, there's no formula for success, but to trust the Lord, to engage in the relationship he introduces us to. St. Paul introduces things that perhaps we take for granted, but it was within the lifetime of the apostles. He said there were a community where people of God, where all of those things. There are not to be those who just keep the rules because that will kill you. But you need to go for the Spirit, the God that's in you, the God who is love, and share that. That's ultimately church. The structures, the institutions, the theology are really to help me and you grow in our awareness of who we are. And so I have to listen with new ears. And sometimes I find it uncomfortable. You mean I really have to do something? You mean I have to get up and get out of bed? It's something that happens sometimes. Well, if they want to be Catholic, let them follow the rules. If they want to be saved, they have to do this and they have to do that. And I don't hear Jesus saying that. He's saying, preach by your witness, by your life. Don't restrict it. Don't have it predicated on fear, but on love. That's a whole different idea of church. It doesn't ruin anything for me. What I grew up with was good for the time, but I wouldn't want to go back. Some of it is embarrassing if I think about today. Some of my narrow kind of things that I just took for granted. I remember in the classroom, there was a sign in every classroom I remember that the holy sacrifice of the Mass was being celebrated the same way in every part of the world, every day. And that meant the Latin Mass that was done in Brooklyn. That's what I thought. And it wasn't until later that I found that that wasn't even true. The Mass was celebrated, but not in Latin all over the world. That half the world wasn't Christian. All of these things, it becomes conscious and clear as I become more mature and more experienced. So does my understanding of church, I hope. That I don't eradicate or negate what I grew up with, sacraments, the Holy Father, the teaching of the church. They're inestimable gifts, but why? To make God happy? For me to be obedient so that God is pleased? I don't think so. I think what Jesus is saying to the apostles is go and preach to your neighborhood, to your group, to your community, to your world. With the major problems that we face in society, they're overwhelming, and I can't begin to give solutions. But if I listen to prayer, if I listen to today's gospel, and I hear Jesus saying, you go out and preach to all peoples. Preach because you are temples, you are church. Be who you believe to be, a witness and temple of God, and have that in your relationship with others. And the church will live, and we'll have a vibrant society. Will the problems be solved? Will we go back to Latin Mass? Will we have whatever it is I thought Brooklyn represented? Can't go back there. I couldn't find my way back to Brooklyn right now. But nevertheless, I can realize that what I had then, I have now. I have a loving God who's present, that I am a temple of the Holy Spirit, and that never fails. God's love is constant, and I'm to witness that in my relationship and love of others. I hope your day is happy and safe, that you continue to pray and reflect for all of us together, and that you continue to maintain faith and hope in God's presence.